Did Uryu Ishida just kill Ichigo Kurosaki? Probably not. However, in the latest episode of Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode number 30, Uryu Ishida went head to head against Ichigo Kurosaki and came out on top. Yhwach completely absorbs the Soul King and Chad and Orihime throw down with a Shustaffel. All this and more in today's review. Let's get into it. Okay, so first a summary section. This episode is divided into 5 parts. Ichigo vs Yhwach, and then Ichigo vs Uryu Part 1. We go back to Kisuke's lab to see what they're doing, come back to Ichigo vs Uryu II, and then we end with Yhwach absorbing the Soul King. So let's start from Ichigo vs Yhwach and we will build from there. They give us a very short recap of Jushiro's Mimihagi sacrifice just to lead you directly into Yhwach witnessing Mimihagi take control of the Soul King and try to stabilize everything. They have Yhwach mention yet again about the Soul King not being reflected in his eye. It's very clear that they want you guys to take note of this, so please do. Ichigo is on the side, he's unable to move at the moment. Yhwach starts walking towards the Soul King, and when Ichigo beckons him to stop, he activates this force-like Conqueror's hockey thing. It feels like a force field that emanates directly from Yhwach and expands outward. It completely changes the color palette of the show. Like Ichigo's hair is now black, his eyes are red, things are purple. Like it's very Taguchi-esque scene. I don't know exactly what it means. I don't know exactly what it accomplished. It struck fear into the hearts of everyone who was around him and it made them stop moving. So I guess maybe this is Yhwach Baha just using his aura to stop everyone in their tracks. I'm not quite sure, but it was a cool visual, I'll tell you that much. Yhwach goes in to try to make contact with the Soul King, but Mimihagi creates a barrier that stops Yhwach's attack. He then comments, Mimihagi should have seen the future, and so why is Mimihagi trying to stop Yhwach from doing something that he already knew would happen? Yhwach's only possible conclusion is that Mimihagi's will is detached from the Soul King, and he decides to destroy the Soul King and Mimihagi altogether. As he's doing this, Ichigo tries to break free, and what he does is that he activates his own Bleach and overrides Yhwach's Bleach in order to get free and prevent Yhwach from making the attack. Now, that was quite interesting to witness for a number of reasons. Number one, Ichigo grabbed hold of Yhwach's sword that was stabbed into the Soul King, he pulled it out, Yhwach then had his Reishi flow into Ichigo by way of his Bleach, and Ichigo was not able to let go of the sword, and he still isn't able to let go of the sword up to this point. In order to let go, he then taps into his own Quincy powers, uses his own Bleach, and then forces Yhwach's Bleach out of him to then break free. This is the first instance we see of Ichigo consciously using Quincy abilities to fight. There'll be one more into the future, but if this is anything to go by, we are in for a treat of absolute massive proportions. And so Ichigo grabs Yhwach's arm, and as he does so, Yoruichi jumps into the fray. She takes these pieces of paper and she stamps them around the Soul King before erecting a barrier of her own. She concludes that after this black arm showed up and took hold of the Soul King, the tremors have stopped, and so we're just going to make this the new Soul King and protect him as such. She tells Ichigo to keep Yhwach occupied as she completes this barrier. Ichigo intends to do just that and tries to fire a Getaka Tensei right at Yhwach, but Yhwach immediately just summons a holy arrow right in Ichigo's face, and there's an explosion, but Ichigo parries it. Now, that was a cool moment. I want to stop there and give Yhwach a shout out. The speed at which he just tapped his hand and then summoned the arrow and fired it. It was so cool, it was so fast, but Ichigo was faster because he was able to parry. They then clash again and Yhwach starts to berate Ichigo for using the word stop instead of kill. Throughout their entire encounter, Ichigo has not used the word kill when referring to Yhwach, he's only used the word stop. And Yhwach is basically calling him out, saying, you can't even bring yourself to say kill against the man who killed your mother. That is why you are weak. Just before Yoruichi completes the establishment of her barrier, she gets shot by an arrow to her back, and that's Uryu Ishida, who makes his way into the scene. Ichigo gets distracted by Uryu's appearance, and Yhwach uses this moment to walk past Ichigo before knocking him back with a Reishi attack. He goes in and he tries to touch Mimihagi when Yoruichi throws these balls at Yhwach. The way she explains it here is that once the first balls hit, the next balls that will be thrown will melt and disintegrate you. But before she gets a chance to do that, Yhwach calls on Pernita. Pernita immediately appears and he twists Yoruichi's arm before Yhwach knocks her off the platform with another Reishi attack, and she falls down below. We'll have to see what happens to Yoruichi. The bear falls apart and Ichigo tries to attack Yhwach from behind, but yet again, Uryu steps in, he fires an arrow, Ichigo is forced to repel it, and now the entire inner holy shrine cracks open and pieces start to fall off. Ichigo screams at Uryu asking him what he thinks he's doing, and Yhwach compliments Uryu before grabbing hold of Mimihagi and he starts to tear Mimihagi off. Like he literally starts ripping Mimihagi off of the Soul King. So that was part 1. Going into part 2, we have Uryu versus Ichigo. Now, Uryu first warns Ichigo and the others because Ganju, Orihime, and Chad are watching. He warns them not to move, and he says, if you move, I will shoot. Ichigo tests that theory by stepping, and Uryu immediately fires, but Ichigo parries. They then have an argument before they actually start fighting because Ichigo at this point in time, he doesn't quite understand what Uryu's motives are here. And so from Ichigo's perspective, he's like, what do you think you're doing? Do you not know why we're here? Uryu says, I heard why you were here, and I'm saying I'm not going to let you interfere with His Majesty. Ichigo says, if we don't stop him, the world of the living, Soul Society, Wekumondo, everything will cease to exist. Don't you know that? Uryu says, I'm well aware of that. And then Ichigo says, well, if you're aware of that, why are you standing on that side? And Uryu's answer is that it should be obvious. I'm standing over on this side because I'm a Quincy. If you want to stop His Majesty, it will have to be over my dead body. He draws his bow, Ichigo grabs hold of his blade, and they start fighting. Now, let me talk to you about this battle between Ichigo and Uryu. This first sequence, like part 1, because we'll talk about part 2 in a second. Part 1, mainly animated by Yuki Sato, was just beautiful. I loved every bit of this. Yuki Sato is such a brilliant animator, and there was a lot of battle strategy that goes into this. So let's do the play-by-play of the battle itself. So here's what happens. Uryu fires an arrow at Ichigo, who parries, and Ichigo immediately tries to close the distance. So he runs into Uryu in close range, and the reason Ichigo does this is that when you're dealing with archers, they're mostly long range to, if you're lucky, mid-range type fighters. And so Ichigo, who's more of a close range combatant, tries to close the gap. And so what Uryu does to counter this is that he forgoes using his reishi bow as a construct to fire his arrows. So his bow disappears and he starts firing arrows without a bow, which basically eliminates Ichigo's close range advantage. They have a shoulder charge, Ichigo swipes at Uryu, who jumps into the sky and summons a Lichtregen, firing off a flurry of arrows at Ichigo. It breaks the ground beneath Ichigo and he falls to the level below. Once he's down there, Uryu starts attacking him from the shadows, specifically below. And so Ichigo starts running around and arrows are flying up from underneath the floor beneath Ichigo before he gets hit by Uryu again, and Uryu is shocked by what he sees because Ichigo protected himself with a blute, which is the second time Ichigo is using Quincy abilities in battle. It's very clear now the blute ability is something that Ichigo can use in battle, and we've seen that twice now. Now, this is the first time that Uryu is seeing Ichigo do this, and presumably, this would be the first time Uryu is made aware of the fact that Ichigo Kurosaki is in fact a Quincy. So that was a really cool moment that they put in there. They don't really talk about it, we just have to assume that that is where Uryu finds out that Ichigo is a Quincy, but he doesn't say anything, it's just implied. Ichigo fires a Getsuga at Uryu, which destabilizes him and he falls down to the ground, and once he's on the ground, Ichigo points a sword at him and says it's over. But Ichigo can't bring himself to actually strike Uryu. He tells Uryu to stop this charade and come to his senses, but Uryu cannot be reasoned with at this point. Uryu is sticking to his beliefs, and he is of the opinion that this world does not need Soul Reapers anymore. His aura starts to manifest and there's a huge explosion of light. Uryu then activates his Sclaverai, the Holy Slave, and then unleashes his complete holy form. In this holy form, Uryu develops these arrow-like gauntlets on his arms and his ankles. He develops arrow-like wings and an arrow insignia on his clothing. It's a very unique arrowhead design surround him, like these projectiles that are just around him. Think about Byakuya Senbon Sakura, but instead of a pink Senbon Sakura with the petals, think of these arrowheads just circling around Uryu. Really, really cool. I approve of this design, but that's where part 2 ends. Let's go into part 3. Now, part 3 essentially accomplishes two things. One, it just establishes that Jushiro Okitake is actively fighting. As Mimihagi is up there in the Soul King Palace, parrying Yhwach and trying its best to do its job, you can see the effects on Jushiro down in the Soul Society. That's number 1. Number 2, the scientists in the research division noticed that the Sutra scale is still saying that there's an imbalance in terms of the souls. But when they go and look, they don't really know what's causing it, because the hollows don't seem to be doing anything. That's when Kisuke makes the point that this isn't an issue of balance. When Mihagi took the place of the Soul King, and the amount of life force that Jushiro has is literally holding all the worlds together. Now, you might ask me, why is this important? This is important to me for a number of reasons. Number one, it feels like a retcon of the Soul King's role in the story of Bleach from a power perspective. Because for a long time, people assumed that when we're talking about the power of the Soul King, it was more of the Soul King is the linchpin of all the three worlds. And so when you kill him, it's not necessarily that his power is paramount to holding worlds together. It's just that he just regulates the balance of souls, and the imbalance of souls is what will destroy the world, not the Soul King himself. I don't know if you understand where I'm coming to with that, where it's not that he's the one who's doing it, he's just doing the balance, and the balance is what's actually doing the worlds together. And so when you talk about Bleach in terms of power scaling, for example, it's like, well, is the Soul King actually doing a 3-world feat, or is it rather just about the imbalance of souls that destroys the world? Well, here, based on what Urahara is saying, I'm led to believe that it's not just about balance. The Soul King and his ability to hold the 3 worlds together is directly linked to his actual power. And so you have Mihagi, which is the right arm of the Soul King, using Ukitake's life force to hold the worlds together. And you can see that because it's just Ukitake, even though the worlds are being held together, there's still imbalances on the sutra scale, meaning things aren't perfect. What does that indicate? It's referencing the actual power of the Soul King's individual to not merely holding the worlds together, but keeping things balanced. And so for all of these years with the Soul King doing what he's been doing, it's not just a matter of keeping balance. He's actually powerful enough to hold everything together and keep things stable. And so, yes, in my opinion, we're talking about a character who has the power to influence 3 worlds, 3 different worlds, all in Bleach. It's not just about balance, he's actually that powerful. Just wanted to clear that up. It felt like a bit of a retcon. Okay, let's go to the next part. Ichigo vs. Uryu Part 2. Now, Ichigo is in his base Shikai form, and Uryu is now in his complete holy form. Watching this fight was really intriguing for me, because Uryu is basically like, he's a combination of Byakuya and Bonzakura and like a Gundam. Because he has these projectiles, and the projectiles are homing in on Ichigo, and each projectile has the ability to fire off attacks of its own. And so he's got all these like hundreds or maybe even thousands of these projectiles flying around. They home in on you, they chase you around, and each and every one of those can fire an attack at Ichigo. So Ichigo's over there, he's parrying everything. So Ichigo tries to parry, and he does, but he gets hit a few times. It doesn't feel like it's doing much damage to Ichigo, but I'm sure maybe it hurts. That's why he feels the need to dodge and block. Ichigo's sword gets knocked away by one of the projectiles. He grabs it, blows a hole in the wall, and goes outside, trying to take the fight out into the open, because in the closed space, he doesn't have a lot of maneuverability. It was a good battle strategy on Ichigo's part. So he goes outside, Uryu continues to home in on Ichigo, who flies away, and he deflects it. There's explosions in the sky. It's all just absolutely crazy as the two continue to argue. Now, Uryu cites that there was a time that he actually believed that Soul Reapers and Quincy's could work together. But then he read Soken's diary, and he learned that their grudge goes back 1,000 years. And after Yhwach decided to go into, quote, hiding, waiting for his time to come in the future, those that were left were targeted and destroyed by the Shinigami, including his grandfather. And so for that reason, he no longer believed that Shinigami and Quincy's can coexist, and he is going to take out that vengeance on the Shinigami, which is why he's now standing with the Quincy. He uses the projectiles to form a sphere on Ichigo, which then detonates. Ichigo is left unscathed, but very, very good showing from Uryu Ishida up to this point. Now, to catch up on what the others are doing, after Pranita took care of Yoruichi, he fell off the platform. Why? I have no idea. Pranita just does weird stuff sometimes. He was grabbed by Gerard Valkyrie, who jumped up to where all the battles are taking place, and Gerard is like holding him, and he sets him down. They see that Ganju, Chad, and Orihime are there, and they're going to attack them. Ganji uses this fireworks attack, and he just detonates a bunch of fireworks up into the sky. The Shusoff would just watch him. Gerard Valkyrie takes a swing of his sword and just blows the entire explosion away. When he does so, it sends an air cut towards Ganju. Orihime gets in front of Ganju and deflects it using her shield attack, but she's not able to dissipate it. She just sort of rebounds it into the sky. Chad then comes in with his left arm of the devil, and he punches the air cut and sends it back at Gerard Valkyrie before Gerard Valkyrie just neutralizes it and we go on to the next scene. Ganju then uses that opportunity to use Seppa to change the ground underneath the Shustaffel's feet to sand and blows a hole through the floor and they fall through. But they come back up with their wings. There was no one actually thought that they were going to be killed by that. So they just return and the battle continues. So they come back up. Gerard Valkyrie decides to fight them on his own. He draws his sword. Speed Blitz right in front of them. Chad summons his right arm of the giant to block and they get blown away. That's the last we see of Chad, Orihime, and Ganju in this episode. But I just want to talk a little bit about the power scaling of this because it was a unique touch in my opinion. Whoever was in charge of keeping the powers balanced did a very, very good job in my opinion. Because essentially what this fight told you is that Gerard Valkyrie, in essentially his base form, one swing, Orihime is able to parry it. She can't dissipate it. She could only redirect it for a second. And Chad, with his left arm of the devil, he wasn't using like the right arm. He was using his left arm, the more powerful arm, is able to send a base Gerard Valkyrie aircut back at him. That's the extent of what they're doing, and I actually don't want to see any more. It was a very good way to show how much they could do against characters this powerful without making it seem unbelievable. I can buy the fact that together, Chad and Orihime together were able to parry one aircut from Gerard Valkyrie in base form. That makes sense to me. I enjoyed that. We go back to Uryu versus Ichigo, and Uryu wants to end this because he realizes that Ichigo isn't taking this as seriously as he should. He starts to charge up an attack he calls the Sternestaub, I believe. Ichigo, he does not want to fight Uryu, but he decides to answer with an attack of his own. He powers up and fires a Getsuga Jujusho at Uryu. Now, Uryu fires, Ichigo does, they clash. Now, what happens here, because I've seen a lot of people online make this mistake, Uryu does not use the antithesis here. That is not what happened. Ichigo missed. Ichigo either, one of two things here happened. Ichigo either missed from the start, or Ichigo can control the trajectory of Getsuga Jujusho in mid-air and just veered it away from Uryu once it overpowered Uryu's attack, which is another thing that we have to make clear. Uryu's Sternestaub attack in his complete holy form versus the Getsuga Jujusho won. Ichigo just missed or made it miss. Incredible power scaling here. I was having a lot of fun with this. Because again, if you remember, Getsuga Jujusho overpowered Yhwach's Sankt Zwingar, which is supposed to be the peak form of a Quincy's defensive abilities. And Getsuga Jujusho busted through that. That was Yhwach coming off the heels of beating Ichibe. Getsuga Jujusho is now 2-0 as far as I'm concerned. It overpowered Yhwach's Sankt Zwingar and it overpowered Uryu Ishida's Sternestaub. Don't mess with Ichigo. And again, Ichigo doesn't actually want to kill Uryu. He made sure to miss on purpose. So that was the second time he could have killed Ishida and chose not to. Uryu then takes a normal arrow and aims it at Ichigo, telling Ichigo, "You're going to have to kill me if you want to stop me." Ichigo, he's hesitant to even take a battle stance. He does not want to fight Uryu. He then raises his sword. Uryu pulls back. Uryu draws his bow and fires. Ichigo decided not to attack, and Uryu blows a hole right through his midsection. Ichigo then falls down into the skies below as the Shustaffel watch Ishida and congratulate him, and Gerard Valkyrie specifically welcomes him into their fort. He's now acknowledged by them. Now with this scene right here, I've seen some people say that was Ichigo about to use his Bankai? No, he wasn't. I know what they mean, because spoiler alert here for the manga readers. I know what they mean here in that when Ichigo uses his Bankai, he puts the two swords together and then he tries to summon his Bankai. This would not make sense to me for a number of reasons. Number one, it does not make sense for Ichigo to jump from Shikai and base form to jump all the way to Bankai. That makes absolutely zero sense. You've not even maximized your Shikai. And again, if you haven't seen my video and if you don't understand, Ichigo's Shikai ability is Holification, is when he does his Holification stuff. Horn of Salvation is a Shikai ability to Ichigo. He hasn't even done that yet, let alone a Bankai, so we can put that to the side. Secondly, when Ichigo puts his sword together, he did so in front of him, not above him. He did so in front of him, and then once he actually fused the swords together, he's holding it to his side. And so no, I do not believe that Ichigo was trying to use his Bankai. I think Ichigo just couldn't bring himself to attack Uryu in any way and took the hit. We'll talk more about the characterization and what I think might be going on here in the next sections to come, but for now, that's what happened. So in the final section of this episode, we have Yhwach's absorption of the Soul King. If you remember, in the prior parts, I established that Yhwach grabbed Mimihagi and starts to rip it off. He ends up completing the process of ripping Mimihagi off, and Mimihagi is lying on the ground beneath his feet. But once he tries to touch the crystal, Mimihagi gets up and continues to parry him. This tug of war continued for many cuts as Uryu and Ichigo are fighting, and as the Shustafu were doing their thing, we would periodically just cut over to what Yhwach is doing, and he's in a tug of war with Mimihagi. It happened like 2 times, before ultimately we see that Mimihagi tries to absorb Yhwach, and it envelops him, and Yhwach then grabs hold of Mimihagi and tears it apart. Now this is an extremely important point, which I will talk about in the next section, but note, Yhwach did not absorb Mimihagi, Yhwach just ripped it apart. Take note of that. Anyway, so once he rips it apart, he stands before the Soul King, he summons his Reishi sword, and asks all of the Shustafu to send him their power. They all channel their Reishi blades into Yhwach's one blade, he grabs hold of it, and destroys the crystal. The Soul King's body then starts to levitate in front of Yhwach, who starts to absorb him. He absorbs him fully, there's an explosion of Reishi, and Yhwach then emerges on the other side, with the multiple eyes that we know, the iconic Yhwach look as you know, and now he's fully absorbed the Soul King. That is where the episode ends. So that right there is the summary of the episode in its totality. Now let's do a manga versus anime comparison because quite a few interesting differences happen here. I have 7 key points that I want to establish in reference to manga versus anime from a comparison perspective. Number 1 is that in the manga, Ichigo does not use his Bleach to free himself. In the manga, we just go from Ichigo just like unable to move and not able to let the sword go to just letting the sword go and he stopped Yhwach. The anime greatly improves on this from the manga, actually giving a reason as to why Ichigo was able to let go and allowing Ichigo to use the Bleach Ven in real time in a battle setting. Good job there. Number 2, the dialogue is much different. The conversation about Ichigo feeling that he has the right to protect all the 3 worlds in the manga happened at this point, once Ichigo is holding Yhwach's wrist and whatever. But in the anime, they took that dialogue and they put it in episode 28, where in my opinion, it fit better. So it's happening now, but we already got that content in episode 28. In the manga, Ichigo fires to get attention at Yhwach and then makes a comment about, so what if you're my ancestor, or so what if your blood runs through my veins? It doesn't mean I'm going to do whatever you want. And Yhwach says, that's for these eyes of mine to decide. Honestly, I never really liked that dialogue. It felt like Kubo just needed to come up with an ending cliffhanger. It felt out of place to me, and the anime did this much better. Number 3, they also placed the comment about Ichigo's power being for the very moment that he cuts down the Soul King. Instead of us learning about it here, they put it in episode 28, where it was actually necessary. See, the explanation for why Ichigo was necessary to sever the tie the Soul King had to the 3 worlds happened when Ichigo actually did it. In the manga, Ichigo did it, a bunch of stuff happened, and then we got the explanation. This is much better. Again, there's a lot of very tangible, realistic changes that they're doing that makes a lot of sense. Number 4, obviously the battle between Ichigo and Uryu, all new content, none of that is in the manga, great stuff on Kubo's part. Kubo has taken credit for, I mean, we already knew it was Kubo, but he did come out to say that just in case it wasn't clear, the new content, yeah, I had a hand in making that content. So good on Kubo for that. I loved it. Number 5, in the manga, the ending of Ichigo vs. Uryu is Ichigo falling off the platform and Lilibaro is trying to take a shot at Ichigo, but Uryu shoots him instead, and then they fall down. Obviously, in the anime, Lilibaro, first, the Shustafu are taking care of Chad, Orihime, and Ganju, and second, they don't do anything. Uryu does this himself. Ichigo still falls down, but Lilibaro does not attempt anything. Number 6 might be the most important point here of the comparisons. In the manga, it's made very clear that Yhwach absorbs Mimihagi. He absorbs Mimihagi first and then moves on to absorb the Soul King. In the anime, they just show Yhwach ripping Mimihagi apart, and you can see Mimihagi just sort of fall away and dissipate and just disappear. Again, I'm not quite sure where they're going. Well, I have a theory where they're going, which we'll talk about, but I just think it's a very unique difference In the manga, it's made so clear that Yhwach absorbs Mihagi, finishes that, and then goes on to absorb the Soul King. Whereas in the anime, none of that. He just like rips Mihagi apart and then goes in to absorb the Soul King. We'll talk about what that is in a second. And then finally, the 7th point is that in the manga, after he does this, he then asks the Schutzstaffel not to disturb him while he absorbs the Soul King, because the assumption here is that it'll take a little bit of time. Whereas in the anime, he just stands in front of the Soul King, he asks them to send their power, he cuts him, absorbs him. It was a pretty quick absorption, all things considered, but it was still badass. I know some people might have enjoyed the fact that it was going to take Yhwach a little bit of time to do this, which is fair. We'll see how they follow up in the next episode. But in my opinion, I was fully on board with this the way it was. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can now talk characterizations. This is where I can actually go deeper into the character implications of the content of this episode. Starting first with Uryu Ishida. So I was very impressed with Uryu Ishida in this episode. You see, the last time we saw Uryu Ishida fight in earnest, in my opinion, was probably Uryu versus Chiruchi, and then Uryu and Renji versus Szayelaporro. Uryu has not had a lot of like full-blown battles since then, and so they needed to nail this, and boy did they. Not only was I impressed with just Uryu's speed, because when both of them were in base form, he was tagging Ichigo with some of the arrows. He was doing a lot of good work there, but the skill to showcase his ability to fire off reishi arrows without the use of a bow, completely negating any negative impact of trying to fight him in a close range combat setting, was genius. Like Uryu Ishida, like in the moment, he just decided to let go of the bow. He just switched to just firing arrows right in your face. I don't need a bow to do this. That was genius on the part of Yuki Sato, because I do know that Yuki Sato was given a lot of free range. If this was her idea, great stuff. And if it was the director's idea, or if this was part of the script or the story composition, great stuff right there. I specifically enjoyed the battle strategy that they employed, where when Ichigo went down to the level below, Uryu fired from behind him and then started to fire from below him, but then during that entire process, he ended up going in front of Ichigo from below. So like he's still on the floor below and he's shooting at Ichigo, who is now on the floor above him, and he's able to tag him. So in my mind, it's like Ichigo gets attacked from behind, he starts running towards the left because the projectiles are coming from below, making it seem like Uryu is directly behind him, not knowing that Uryu is actually in front of him. And so by the time Ichigo gets to the end of the hallway, he's already tagged by Uryu. Great stuff on Uryu's part. I like it. Now let's talk about his complete holy form. I thought it looked really good. The arrow insignia, it's a callback from one of the previews that they've done in preparation for Core 2, I believe, and now they're using it here. I thought that it was a win. I'm not gonna lie, overall, I'm not really a fan of projectile-based combatants. I'll just be really honest with you. It's part of the reasons I'm not a fan of these magic-based shows that we get nowadays in anime. Like even like a Black Clover, Asta is like a different thing, but like some of these other shows that are based on magic and mages, where they have their grimoire and they're standing over there, the next person has their grimoire, they're standing over there, and then like I do an attack. It lacks physicality. It lacks a certain level of intimacy, because they're all just standing far away from each other, just doing stuff from a distance. I'm not really into that. I like things to be a little bit more close and intimate and more physical, in my opinion. That sounds like I'm talking about something else. but I thought that Uryu's complete holy form hits the sweet spot in the middle that allows me to enjoy it without having my distaste for projectile-based combatants overwhelm me too much. But in reference to Uryu's character, if there's one thing that this battle succeeded in doing, it made you wonder whether Uryu is really going to do what you think he's going to do from your knowledge of the manga, because I'm not so sure it's going to go like Kubo wrote it in the manga anymore. In the manga, Uryu was very clearly a double agent. You could see the writing on the wall, and there wasn't really any reason to believe that anything else was going to happen, to be quite honest. No one was surprised when it turned out that he was a double agent. Absolutely no one. But in the anime, the way that they've handled Uryu's character arc so far, by showing us what the trigger seemingly is, learning the true history of the Quincy, and then being out there in the rain with Hashfall then making contact with Uryu, bringing him in, the implication now being that Yhwach told Uryu the truth, he's told Uryu the true fate of the Quincy, and that the Soul King abandoned them to be slaughtered and hunted towards extinction. It's not so easy to say that, oh, Uryu's just being a double agent. Are you sure? Are we sure? I mean, I still believe that he is, but kudos to the story for making you question that, which I think was the best accomplishment of this episode in regards to Uryu's character. When it comes to him striking Ichigo down, I think many watchers picked up on the fact that there's two things going on here. Number one, if he really wanted to kill Ichigo, he could go for the head. Honestly, he could have gone for the heart. He went for like Ichigo's side. Now look, in Bleach characters are durable as hell, bro. Like, we got Hiyori, who was basically cut in half and she lived, okay? So this is nothing, especially when you have Orihime Inoue on the scene. In support of the Uryu double agent side of the story, Uryu probably knew that A, Ichigo's not gonna die if I blow a hole through his side, and B, Orihime's here and she'll probably save his life. And then my final point on Uryu has to do with Mimihagi. As I said before, Yhwach did not absorb Mimihagi, he just tore it apart. If we call back to episode number 27 of Bleach, we all saw the insignia on Uryu's hand. It looked like Mimihagi, and at the time I made the theory that if they establish the fact that Yhwach Almighty cannot see body parts and fragments of the Soul King, they need to give fragments of the Soul King to certain characters who can then use it in the final battle. One shout for Aizen Sosuke here is that the Hogyoku might contain a fragment of the Soul King because of what he took from Rangiku. Now being there, Aizen would then be in possession of a Soul King fragment, and so there he is. And then you see Uryu with the insignia on his hand. It makes me wonder, is that Mimihagi? Because it's certainly not Pernita, it's most likely Mimihagi. But based on the manga, I never quite knew how they would scheme their way into having Mimihagi go into the hands of Uryu Ishida. Because in the manga, Yhwach absorbs Mimihagi. But then you come to this episode, and Yhwach does not absorb Mimihagi. He specifically just tears it away, and it just falls to the side. Is it so crazy? Not to mention the fact that the extra content from episode number 29 established that Mimihagi could pretty much choose whoever he wanted to give his power to. Like, they took Jushiro to the shrine, and Mimihagi just said, okay, fine, I'll possess this child. Is there any reason to believe that Mimihagi doesn't just select Uryu next and just bestow powers onto Uryu, which then allows Uryu to partake in the final battle in a completely different light outside of Yhwach's vision? I know Yhwach is there, but Yhwach won't see Mimihagi doing so. And if Uryu is indeed a double agent, he won't let Yhwach know about what's happening. It could be a very genius, under-the-table way of creating a very intriguing setup for the final battle that is to come. That is my theory. We don't know exactly if it'll happen, but man, am I excited. Okay, so that's Uryu. Let's talk about Ichigo Kurosaki. In reference to Ichigo, a lot of people are kind of up in arms about the fact that Ichigo lost. I'll talk about that in a second, but the first thing I want to establish here about Ichigo's character based on the findings of this episode is he has issues fighting friends. That should come at no surprise, but it's very clear. Ichigo is not about that life of fighting friends. If you remember the Fullbring arc, he was so traumatized when Tsukishima messed with Chad and Orihime's mind, saying stuff like, this is not why I got my powers back, to fight my friends. It's not something I want to do. And here you can see, Uryu was really taking the fight to him, but Ichigo was just on the defensive for a majority of the battle, and he did not want to fight Uryu, even going as far as to miss purposefully with his Getsuka Jujisho. I don't find this as a flaw. If anything, I think that there are three ways this could go. Number one is that they have a rematch and Ichigo takes the rematch more seriously and defeats Uryu there, getting his win back. Number two is that Ichigo and Uryu don't fight again until their resolution, and instead somebody steps in to fight Uryu. Some people have theorized that Renji is going to fight Uryu. I don't see it, but if we're trying to give Renji moments of importance, that's a pretty good position to put him in if he does fight Uryu, and it's like a really bloody, heartfelt battle. We'll see what happens there. The third option, which I think would be genius on the part of the animation staff, would be if Ichigo is in on the entire thing. You guys remember that Ichigo has this ability where you can see into the hearts of the people that he's fighting. If you remember from OG Bleach, like, he said that every person that he fights, he's able to read their hearts or feel what it was that was in their soul. But when he was fighting Gin Ichimaru, he couldn't really tell what Ichimaru's goal was because it was like Ichimaru wasn't really looking at him. That's an ability that Ichigo has, and it's not limited to only Soul Reapers. And so I would be incredibly, incredibly happy if they made it so that at a certain point, Ichigo started to get the feeling, and he was able to feel Ishida's soul, to know that Ishida was not actually being serious, take the hit so that Ishida's cover wouldn't be blown, knowing that Orihime was going to be there to save him. If they do that, that would be amazing. Amazing. I sound like that one podcaster guy. Amazing. It would be awesome if they do that. I really hope they do. I don't know. That's just my take. And then the final point in Ichigo here about the loss. Was this a bad loss? In my opinion, no. The anime went to great lengths to establish that Ichigo could have beaten Uryu on 2 separate occasions but chose not to. Not to mention, Ichigo has 2 forms to ascend to. He could go into Horn of Salvation and then into his Bankai. Uryu did not use his antithesis here at all, but that's one power that he has. And so, no, I don't think that this hurts Ichigo in any way. And for the people who are mad, understand that I understand you. Believe me, I get it. But here's the fact. Kubo has never been shy about having characters beat the crap out of Ichigo. Like, how are you an Ichigo fan and you don't know that Ichigo has been getting his ass handed to him since 2004? Like, this is not news, bro. Like, everybody beats down Ichigo until Ichigo gets his get back later on. That's just what he does. So, I'm not bothered at all. And obviously, I understand that people will probably say that, well, Rebirth, that was fine when Ichigo was fighting with his suppressed power. But now Ichigo is meant to be full power. He shouldn't be taking L's. And to that I say, I fully understand. Believe me, I understand that you want to protect Ichigo's image to make Ichigo appear very serious and not a character to be messed with. Here's the problem. Uryu Ishida needed a win. I'll be very honest with you. Uryu needed a win. He needed a win from somebody that would legitimize his position and legitimize his turn. I feel like I'm talking about wrestling right now. He needed to beat somebody substantial. Now you tell me, if Uryu beat Uryu, would that have done anything? No, they don't even have a history. I don't even want them to scrap. What if he had beaten Chad? Would you care? Orihime, sure, for anger point, like people would be angry if he beat Orihime because we love Orihime. But would that have really done anything? No. What about Ganju? Would you care? No. The only other person there was Ichigo. And I get it. He's coming off the heels of beating a Squad 0 member in Senjumaru. So he's already riding high. I think this was important to keep the momentum going. Ichigo does not suffer a loss to his aura after taking a questionable asteric loss to Uryu Ishida, who is in his complete holy form while Ichigo is merely in his Shikai base form. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna lose sleep over that. I'm not. And then finally on Yhwach, they're focusing a lot on him wanting to create a new world. They're focusing on establishing Yhwach's limits, so pay attention to that because that might be important moving on. His OST is like the coldest OST in the entirety of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War. That Yhwach's theme, I'll be real, open up the discussion. We're gonna talk about it. Yhwach's theme here, his Australian theme that they've been using, versus Aizen Sosuke's Treachery. You know what I'm talking about. I'm leaning towards that more so than Treachery, and I know Treachery is iconic, but this Yhwach theme, man, it's so special, man. I can't get enough of it. It's awesome. It's so fitting. The gravitas and the mythical status of Yhwach when this music plays, and you can tell that the anime understands that this is Yhwach's theme. They used it during the Ostfalen, they used it when he was walking towards the Soul King, and they used it again over here. That is my guy. I'm gonna make a video on Yhwach in the future because if the manga has anything to go by, Yhwach's involvement in this core is basically over now that he's absorbed the Soul King. I think at this point, Yhwach is going to be relegated to the background and we'll go deal with other stuff. So this might be the perfect option to talk about Yhwach's character up to this point and why he is one of the greatest villains in all of anime history. Yhwach freaking Baha, my guy. Okay, so for story implications, Ichigo has not fallen off the inner holy shrine and he's not fallen down into the earth below. Now, again, I don't know the exact distance, but in order to even get back down to this area, you have to go through like 72 barriers, like actual barriers. So it's a long way down, is my point. The Fullbringers are probably going to come in to help Ichigo. I imagine that the Fullbringers are on their way up and Ichigo's on his way down, so they probably catch him. They probably caught Uryu II. Either that or Orihime saves Ichigo. Or actually, I'm just gonna put this out there. I don't think this will happen, but I'll put it out there. what's Ichigo doing right now? What if maybe Ichigo grabs Ichigo somehow to save him, and then he hands him over to the other people before he goes off to do whatever creepy stuff he's doing? Just keep that in mind. These are the options. We are at the point where Grimmjow is probably returning next episode, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, bro. Grimmjow probably returns next episode, and I can't wait to see my Pantera once again. I expect to see something cool. If you're going to give all these characters new stuff to do, you better give Grimmjow something really, really cool to do. Also, Aizen Sasuke got the poem for next episode, which tells me that he's going to do something pretty significant. Now, is Nanana Najiku still alive? I have no idea. But Aizen got a whole poem. That means a significant portion of the next episode will be dedicated to him. And I believe the TikTok for Bleach actually put out a hype reel for Aizen Sasuke's return. So it could be completely different from what happened in the manga. Because at this point in time, if you're a Bleach fan who read the manga, brother, everything's changing. They're switching things over here, placing this over there, including this over here. It's insane, and I love every bit of it. And finally, as far as like story implications are concerned here, keep an eye on Mimihagi. I would not be surprised if something happens with Mimihagi and Uryu, or Mimihagi and somebody else. If it ends up being nothing, I'll take the L. You know I will, but watch Mimihagi. So far in Bleach 1000 Year Blood War, if there's anything that we've learned, they don't just do things for no reason. I mean, sometimes they do, but they mostly don't. They don't make huge story changes for no reason. This is Kubo trying to tell the story as he intended. We got a full-blown battle between Ichigo and Uryu. We got Uryu using a complete holy form, something we would never have dreamed we would be getting when Kubo was drawing the manga. Things are changing. They don't just forget the fact that Yhwach absorbed Mimihagi. That's not a simple thing. So keep an eye on that, truly. Keep an eye on that. Anyway, so there, I've broken this down in great detail. Here's my episode overview and final rating. Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 30 is an example of how 1000 Year Blood War shines. When 1000 Year Blood War has its unique combination of the aesthetic, which I believe is the best Bleach has ever looked, combined with the additional lore content, once you couple that with great animation like we got here, there are very few anime that can stand toe-to-toe with it. The level rises to such a stupendous status, because whenever you're talking about all these other shows that are greatly animated and everything, they're usually lacking in story quality or show impact. You know, it's like, it's either great, it's either well animated and nobody cares, or it's well animated and it's not very good. You know, when Bleach has the full trio combination of 1000 Year Blood War aesthetics, extra content, and great animation, you can't beat Bleach. Like, nothing touches Bleach once you have all these three. Nothing. I think that Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 30's animation quality is a very realistic expectation of what these fans would want from 1000 Year Blood War. To where it wasn't like episode 6 where Hiroyama crazy stuff. Like, it wasn't on that level. To me, this felt like your solo leveling Kano stuff. It felt like your Dons and your JJKs, not the JJK episodes where they go crazy, not those. But like, it just felt like, hey, like we've got stuff here. If this is the level that they can give, a lot of Bleach fans would be happy. Obviously, we don't know if they can keep it up, but we'll be watching to see what happens. The music choices in this episode were great. Just want to put that out there. That theme when Ichigo and Uryu are fighting, superb. And you know, 1000 Year Blood War, since Core 1, it's extremely consistent. I understand that the animation may not be as amazing as we would like, but 1000 Year Blood War as an anime, not just on an animation level, as an anime, where you're sitting down to watch an anime, 1000 Year Blood War is extremely consistent. It's dense with a lot of story progression in almost every episode. There's always things to talk about. And the animation isn't so terrible that it takes you out of it. And then every now and then they'll hit you with that upgraded animation, which then takes it to the next level. Like 1000 Year Blood War is an extremely consistent adaptation. It's a consistent anime. I think even the biggest 1000 Year Blood War haters have to admit that. Like, just as an anime, purely as an anime, it's extremely consistent. I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. This is my second favorite 1000 Year Blood War episode behind episode 6. I had so much fun with this. I'm so sad that I was out of town. I couldn't be here at home to do the full-blown stream and everything, but this is my second favorite 1000 Year Blood War episode. I loved it. I love it to death. So I think I'll leave things there. This has been a pretty long review. I've given you guys a lot of content. I hope you enjoy it. If you made it this far and you're not subscribed, brother, hit subscribe. Sister, hit subscribe. Join the channel. Help me grow what we're doing over here. You know you like it. You know it's good. Anyway, I'll leave you guys there with that. This is your boy Rebirth, signing off until the next video. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay cool. Peace out.